What's good, everyone? This is Marcus the Fingaz back with another episode of Syncrets To Success, the podcast that I have launched to discuss sync licensing, trailer music, and all things sync. If you are not familiar with sync licensing, it is getting your music into movie and television as a sync musician. You can join the Syncrets To Success Facebook group, a Facebook group that I run talking about sync. There's a great community. We have over 1,000 people in there now. You can also check out the sponsor of this episode, ASTS. Down in the description, there's a link where you can get 20% off any of their products by using a code. I think it's called Syncrets To Success, but check out the code in the link in the description. ASTS provides sound sample packs for us music creators to use in our music productions for sync licensing, trailer music, and all things sync, things like that. This episode, I'll talk briefly about, hopefully briefly, the difference between a composer and a sync licensing musician or artist. Starting with a composer who would create original music and compositions for a film or a project or even a scene, where a sync licensing artist might still create a composition, but it's more of a song as opposed to more of an orchestral type thing. So composers usually, I used to associate composers with like someone who literally would be in front of the orchestra, until I learned that all composers don't direct orchestra, but composers mostly are using orchestral sounds in their productions. And a sync licensing artist is someone who is creating songs specifically to brief for a scene. A lot of times a composer has a lot of time to compose music, whereas a sync artist might be pitching to something that is usually, for me, I've seen things that are less than a week, and usually within a day or less for briefs for sync licensing. So sync licensing is usually more fast-paced, especially if you're in the advertising field, the movie trailer space, or TV shows, things like that. Sometimes you might have a little bit of a leeway, but usually with sync licensing, a week max. And with composers working on a film, they can be working on a film for 2-3 years for the music for a film. So so there's all of those different elements. Some composers do write out sheet music, very rare these days, but they either write it out or they have software where they have to get the sheet music written if there's going to be an orchestra performing that. In sync licensing, we're really not dealing with like orchestras so much. There might be a live band element if the sync artist has a band or has musicians they can rely on, because the project wants like a live band feel. I have band musicians that I can reach out to. I don't have a band, but I have musicians I can reach out to if I need a bass player or drums or things like that. And then we have virtual instruments that can emulate that. But most composers, if they're working on a project, it might have a budget for like a small orchestra, or even if it's a orchestra overseas to record. So there's those differences there, and that also comes with time, because you have to get on the orchestra schedule. If there are union players playing, there's a budget and time associated with that, and then there's blocking off the studio, then mixing the actually orchestra stuff to the film, and mixing that with like dialogue and sound effects and all that, which does happen on sync side, but it's not as doesn't take as long of a process as it does for film. And on the music creation side, composers have a little bit more time on that field of things. Composers focus on sort of creativity, originality, more musical ideas. A lot of times with sync, we have a brief and we have to follow the brief. A composer might have a specific brief or general direction from a director, but for the most part, composers can have a little bit more freedom on the musical creative side, and they might have 90 minutes of a film, and let's say 30 to 45 minutes of music in the film that they can play with, whereas a sync artist might have 90 seconds to 2 minutes of a song to work in a scene for a show, or even less. It could be 30 seconds to a minute if it's an advertising campaign. So sync artists have a little bit less time overall to focus on the project. So they have to focus more on the technical skills, the performance ability, the ability to create specifically to the brief, to nail it. And I would say composers, and I've actually done both sides of things, composers and sync. Composers often work alone, coming up with musical ideas. So I've worked on, film, independent films and things like that, or museum exhibits, which I would sort of tie more because it was all custom composition. I've worked on music for Disneyland, which was custom composition, so I consider that more composer than sync. So with those projects, it was really meeting with the team, getting what the team wanted, ideas from the team, maybe references for like the film or whatever, talking with them. In some cases, it's like a couple hours of conversation, taking my notes, and then Sometimes you get footage, which rarely happens in sync, unless you are like working directly with the music supervisor or the team, the production team on the show. But with the composer, they'll get the footage to compose the music to, or they might get screen grabs or what's called dailies, where it's like daily video shoots of what the director shot that day, so that the composer can be inspired by the images and can create music. In some cases, very rare cases, unless it's like a big, film, a composer can be sent to areas, or they can negotiate with the company to, hey, Ludwig Göransson, when he started working on Black Panther, went to Africa. Whether that was part of his budget or not, I'm not sure, but for some reason he went to Africa to get the authentic sound, to get some African artists involved with the soundtrack of Black Panther. So there is that authenticity that you have, again, that comes with the time as a composer that you might not have with sync licensing. So if you're doing a sync project, they're like, hey, we want African music. A lot of times we're like, okay, send the references because they need that today. So I don't have time to fly to Africa to, get some African, authentic African sounds. But you can go online, get some, sample packs, or not sample packs, some sound libraries. Samples are typically a no-no in sync, but get some sound libraries that have like the African drums and things like that. So composers, again, they can have a little bit more freedom on the creative side. They might have capacity or budget or bandwidth to travel to certain areas depending on the project. They might even get invited on set for the film or the TV show to get, just to be immersed in the environment. So as a composer, you might, get invited to the set, like, hey, just check out the set, maybe that'll inspire you musically. I haven't done that yet. I should have did that. The last film I worked at was actually filmed locally to where I live, but I did have a great meeting with the director. I had lunch with the team, in person. So that was great, meeting people in person, which actually you might not have in sync either, unless you're going to different conferences, then you can meet up. But a lot of times with a film project, it's over an extended amount of time. So you have time to be like, hey, if you're ever in my area, if I'm ever in your area, maybe we can meet up halfway. We can, if there's a budget, we can fly somewhere. Let's talk about this in person. And there's that collaborative effort that can be spread out over time. But as the music creative side, most composers do work independently, creating music. They might have a team of composers like Hans Zimmer and those guys have a team of composers that can help out on a project. But for the most part, work independently and then outsource or reach out to their orchestras or their orchestrators who can Cyper, yo, what's good? Oh, we need a chat, man. Thanks for jumping in on that project. Definitely would like to chat with you about some of those African initiatives and sync and things like that. With composers diving in on the project, they have a little bit more time. So with sync, it's especially the projects I'm chasing right now, because I do work full time. So I do put that caveat out there. Until I can make a full-time income from music to support my family, that is the goal I'm chasing. I do work full time at a great company, National Geographic. It's no secret. I've been here forever, and I work full-time while I'm chasing the music dream. So a lot of the opportunities I'm chasing are last-minute briefs, because the time that I can put forth, that I can focus a couple hours on making music, a day, and put it towards a brief, or like projects, that is like maybe a weekend, like Cyper jumped in on an incredible project opportunity a couple weeks ago with one of his artists. That was pitching to an album with a new company I'm working with. So aligning with companies that hopefully can provide the opportunities that I'm looking for, that can lead the way to getting those placements that will hopefully get me closer to working full time. So I am doing both ends. I am composing. I have a film coming out that I worked on. I believe they said it'll be out next month, called Hemisphere. It is a, I guess, space thriller. I worked on that last year. So that's the thing, with composing, worked on it last year and it's coming out this year. So there's a long lead time because they had to do post-production, things like that. Part of that is I can also put out the soundtrack album. So when I do films, this is actually the first time I pitched it. So I was like, hey, if you send me the footage in the order of the cues, I would love to put out the soundtrack album. So I might go back to some of the other films I worked on to see if I can put out those soundtrack albums, because I never thought about that until now. But I am working on putting out a soundtrack album for Hemisphere, which comes out next month. So I've done the composer side. I did a film last year called Jack on the Come Up, and that entered a bunch of film festivals, won a couple of film festivals. I've done film couple years ago. I used to do music for museum exhibits, which isn't exactly film, but it's custom composition. And again, as I mentioned, composing for Disneyland, which also was custom composition, so it wasn't sync. So sync is when you are getting a brief and say, hey, we're working on the scene where two guys are going to be in the bar fighting, and we need a hip hop song in the background. And then, it's like you might go through your catalog and pitch to that, but they might reach out to a bunch of people and they might get 100 submissions. So there's that. With sync, I think it's a little bit more competition on the sync side for scenes and things, but there's also a lot more opportunity on the sync side. And then there's some opportunity on the movies, especially on the independent film side. So it's just weighing those pros and cons. As a composer, you also want to know a little bit about, you don't have to have music theory. Again, Hans Zimmer doesn't read music, but he can put together an incredible score. So just knowing what you want to hear, and knowing a little bit about strings and how you want them to sound together, and making it sound realistic. That's the big thing. You can use virtual instruments, but make it sound realistic, because that authenticity. And there is a huge difference between a real orchestra and virtual orchestration, but there are some libraries that are they're about as close as you can get, but it's still not the real thing, but they're really good. So we'll do another episode about some libraries that I would use for either composing or sync. Actually, I'm going to start a series because I have a company that sent me, I have a couple companies that send me software. I do reviews for some companies. So I'm going to do a series where I'm going to make it part of this podcast, where I'm going to talk about, let's say maybe 5 days straight, talk about one company and then their products, and then for another 5 days talk about another company. And then I'll have some personal goals in line with that also, so I'll talk about that when I launch that, hopefully this week, next week, because for the personal goals I have with that, I need to launch it soon to sort of get some of the personal selfish benefits out of that. But yeah, composers versus sync, that's what this episode is about, being a composer versus a sync artist. And composers really focus on creating music over a longer period of time, for longer form content, independent films, things like that. Sync licensing artists usually focus on creating music for a scene that is, the songs usually are 2 minutes or less, 2.5 minutes or less. A lot of my music is 90 seconds. If it's for an ad campaign, like I said, it could be 30 seconds to a minute. So it all depends on the context, but sync is a lot more short form. Composers for film, a lot more long form. I've done both. Which one do I enjoy the most? Personally, I like because of the time that I can allocate to it, I like the sync licensing because of the time. I've had more success on the composer side, where it takes me longer to compose, but I've had more financial success on the composer side, mainly because of the Disney opportunity. And that actually took me a weekend to compose for that, and the time that I spent on it versus the pay that I got was really well. So that is that. Looking for more opportunities on either side, sync and composers. I'm working on a couple projects now. Just got a bunch of projects this week, and then balancing that with work, because I do work full time. So I put that out there just to set expectations, because people think that I do music full time, and all I really talk about is music. But I make music in as much spare time as I can. So I usually don't sleep. Not the best way to go about it, but I have a wife and kids, so I want to be there as much as possible. I have 2 teenagers, and they're getting older and graduating soon, so trying to enjoy these last moments while they are in the house. And then of course my wife. So trying to strike the balance between being a musical creative and spending time with family and working full time. So the only thing that right now I can sacrifice is sleep. So I say that in most of my videos because I like to set the expectation. It does take some part of sacrifice, depending on your situation, and of course, investment into the software you need, time investment into aligning with the right brands and companies. I'll do another episode on libraries. I think I might have talked about it before in the series. Definitely check out the Syncrets To Success podcast. This is episode 30 something, 5 or 6. But there are some libraries that I aligned with that, that are new. So joining new libraries, but 3 or 4 of them that I joined over the last year no longer exist because they couldn't keep things going. What's great about that is I get my music back. Things like that happen, even on the composer side. You might work on a film and the film gets dropped, or the production company goes a different direction. I haven't had that before. I have talked about in the past. I haven't talked about it on this series, but I worked on a film a couple years ago, and the initial conversation I had with the director, they actually wanted to go another direction because I told them up front. I was like, hey, I'm going to use virtual instruments for this. the budget doesn't really seem like there's room for a live orchestra, so they decided to go with another composer who did like Broadway, like composing with orchestras and things, and they were going to work with an orchestra with the budget they had. And then it turns out the production company came back to me because they were like, this guy, we can't get in touch with him. He's not answering our emails. Maybe he's too busy for us. Are you still interested? And of course, I had more leverage then, so I was able to negotiate some good things on the back end, working on that project. So also knowing when you have leverage, but also staying true to yourself. I'm usually upfront, like, hey, there's no budget here for me to bring in a live orchestra, or even like a Fiverr like violinist, or a freelance violinist, because it's so low, it just wouldn't be worth me working on it and then trying to bring someone else in. In other cases, there's some libraries and things that I'm connected with that have orchestra deals, mostly overseas, where you can get a discount on a couple hours of orchestral recordings, that can give you maybe 15-20 minutes of a orchestral score. So so I'm navigating those avenues. I'm learning those avenues from as much as I can personally, working on these projects, and seeing how to make those things happen. There's nothing like hearing an orchestra, a real orchestra, perform your music, even if it's like a high school orchestra. So use what you got, and then when I start hearing these things come to fruition and experiencing these things, and especially with my family, that's the biggest thing. Like going to see my music at Disneyland with my wife and kids, like you can never take that from me. The day that I could hear my music on a movie trailer in a movie theater, I probably I don't know what I'm gonna do, man. I'm probably gonna go live in the movie and they're gonna kick me out because I'm going live. They're gonna think I'm bootlegging the film. So just seeing and envisioning already in my mind the success coming, and just learning the process, enjoying the process, studying the process, and striking that balance between work, life, family, and music. So composers, if for me, I like doing both. I enjoy the sync side, especially collaborating with artists and musicians. On the sync side, like I said, I'm working on a lot of projects over the next week, which is crazy because this is like one of the busiest weeks at work for me, busiest weeks at work. So trying to strike that balance. So when I get home, this week it's usually like 9-10 o'clock at night, and then usually up to 1 or 2 making music. But you got to do what you got to do. And then usually my schedule is a little bit more less crazy. This is just a crazy week for work. So yeah, striking that balance, working on music, finishing up projects, and then lining up some other projects, finding libraries to work with for sync and trailers, and doing it all. So my goal is to get a brief a day, and then every once in a while I might get a composer project to work on a film. So depending on what happens with those things, usually so far I've done a film, like 1 film a year. And then if you can count 2, if you count the Disney thing, it wasn't a film, it was like a 10-minute thing. But this one that's coming out next month, or this month, is the first feature length. So the last couple films I worked on were more independent, like 30 minutes or less short films. This one will be a feature length. So first feature length I worked on, synth score, so not really orchestral, mostly synth inspired. So enjoy working on it. Soundtrack coming soon. Stay tuned. The film is called Hemisphere. I don't know how they're going to release it. If it's going to be a film festival thing, or if it's going to be on the if it's going to be film festival, or if it's going to be on the streaming platforms. So stay tuned. Got to get to work. Like I said, busy week, but stay tuned for more episodes. I'm going to try to launch that series of the library plugins, starting with IK Multimedia, because I have some stuff of theirs that I want to share with you all. Hopefully over the next few days. I just got to get the videos recorded and edited, and then I'll have that out. Thank you all for the comments, Cyper. Thank you, Jersey Boy. Thank you. I just did some New Jersey club beats for a project that I'm going to be pitching this week. So yeah, it was a whole new vibe for me. I haven't really done that before. Then I mixed that with the trailer stuff. So blending that stuff has been great. And then learning these different avenues as a composer, as a trailer music composer, as a sync licensed composer, I can blend all that together because I haven't met anyone yet that's doing all of those things, at least from my perspective. So yeah, stay tuned. Got to get to work. Some people coming around the corner. So yeah, be safe and be well, everyone. All right. Peace.